Over the last 2 seasons, Bradley Chubb has produced an 11.5 sack season as well as an 8.5 sack season, which makes him a very serviceable edge rusher. And of course, we know the Bears need one. Is this something that the Bears can take advantage of now that Miami has released him? Let's talk about it. Listen, if you're new to the channel, it's your boy PK. This is the Windy City Breeze. Talking all things Chicago sports. You know, we've been on a tear. The goal is to get to 100K soon. So the whole goal is for you all to like, share, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Let's get into the topic. Bradley Chubb is a guy. I'm not saying that to be negative. I mean, listen, 8 sacks, it's about average when you come to when you talk about good edge rushers. And obviously, everyone's on the fence because we see that we have a Max Crosby name that gets thrown out, a Myles Garrett's name, and just all those monster defensive players that we would want the Bears to go after. But to be honest with you, most of us, especially because we know how this works, we expect a move to be made, but those moves require us to give up multiple picks, a high level player, and the Chicago Bears seem to be right there. We seem to be right there. We have to clean up some things mechanically, uh, get more time within the operation and things of that nature. So at a certain point, when a player like Bradley Chubb becomes available, it makes it a really good conversation because we may not need to take the home run to get where we need to go because we just need to get a little pressure and any pressure that we can get on a QB that allow our secondary to do what they've been doing. Again, we led the league in takeaways with a bad defensive line. That should, I mean, listen, tip your cap. DA did some things, but the players themselves stepped up. We actually have a really good defense if we can add key pieces there. Now, Bradley Chubb could be that. But most people will say, well, the Miami released him for a reason and all that stuff. And I get that narrative. I get that logic. It checks. It makes sense. Bradley Chubb is 29, going on 30. He's been good, not necessarily great. But here it begs the question, do you have to be great as the individual to be able to have a high impact on a team that already has certain key pieces there? Again, you could rationalize that if you're going to make any big swings, things of that nature, you go after those particular players that I named previously. Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, who just did an interview with Caleb Williams. By the way, going to have another video dropping soon on that one because it seems to be a fire interview. But I've already started to record this one. Didn't want to pivot, but we'll get back to that one. That being the case, though, there's a couple of things I like to walk through and when I make these type of videos and talk to myself with in regards to it. Um, there are two ways in which you can build a team. Yep, you probably should and probably may have to, and I've been saying that before, to maximize on your championship window, go after a Myles Garrett or go after a Mad Max. But how many times have we seen the best team in NFL, especially from on paper, not make it to the Super Bowl and not win it? Let's be honest, let's just have this conversation. For a very long time, the best team outside of the Chiefs, but the best complete team had been San Francisco. And yes, they've made it close. They've gotten there. They've gotten to the dance. But they didn't win. In fact, they may be the current version of the 90s or 80s Bills, whatever that Bills team that went 4 years ago. They may be the version of that if the Bills also still wasn't choking. But they didn't win. And you want to look at the best team overall, many people would argue that the Baltimore Ravens, from a defensive standpoint, when they acquired Roquan, from definitely from an offensive standpoint, when they got Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, with the emergence of Zay Frazier and still having a really good tight end, that they had all the pieces you need to win and were pretty much favorites in many people's camps. But they didn't win. They didn't get over the hump. And that's a lot of money that was spent on those people. Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles worked out. But now you look at where they are now, and many people start to question that because I mean, you have one of the best running backs in the league. You have a good, a great to great, depending on how you feel about him, Jalen Hurts. And we know AJ Brown is a dog whenever they throw him the ball. And that defense is really freaking good. Now they did beat KC, but again, many people didn't have that team winning this year. It was kind of like a one and done type thing for them, although they've been twice at this particular point. But many people counted them out. But that roster on paper was loaded. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? You may not have to have a Miles Garrett or Mad Max to go ahead and make a good run at a Super Bowl. In fact, statistics will kind of say teams that actually take a more methodical approach to team building actually have more success. That's actually a real thing. You can Google that. Now, you can absolutely buy your championship, but that typically doesn't happen with the defensive end. What I mean by that is a lot of teams already have the defense in place, and that team was kind of built around that particular defense. You can go ahead and say the Rams, right? They made that trade for Matthew Stafford, but they already had everything in place, and they went out and got the QB to fit and get them over the hump. But they were pretty much a defensive led team, if you could argue that. The Bears have totally upended what they are known for. Yes, we're still going to be the monsters of the Midwest and monsters of the Midway, but it's probably because we're going to be an offensive juggernaut, thanks to Ben Johnson, not necessarily because our defense is going to be smothering like it was in the past. And the great thing about the modern NFL is it doesn't have to be. A Miles Garrett, a Mad Max are a nice to have in many respects. They are right. If we get that guy, we should win, but it's not a guarantee. But people like Bradley Chubb, despite his age and things of that nature, and I don't even think he's considered that old, at 29 and what he can do, I think he can be very not just serviceable. He could be a potential missing piece. He could be the very edge rusher that we need to help create the right amount of pressure. Again, no, he's not going to be 17 sacks. That's not what you're going to get in that situation. But what does his ability to provide some type of pressure really help our secondary to do? What does it help our backers do? It helps a lot. Again, I know it sounds like I'm like capping for Bradley Chubb to come here, but I also have to consider this. These are franchise players that we've been continuously having these discussions on. We've continually had discussions on getting Miles, getting Max, but those people are making 40. Max is probably going to make 45, and those franchises are depending on building around them. It's kind of hard to have your defense solidified and not capitalize on that opportunity. For them to trade them away, both organizations will pretty much be restarting at zero. So the likelihood of it is relatively low when you consider all the other shifts that have happened on both organizations, different head coaches, ownership groups, stuff like that. Why would I give away my prize jewel when I can actually still build around it with both of them still being in their prime? So a move like this, depending on what the asking price is, because he will be able to sign with whoever, is great. Now we look at the player himself when we say, hey, well, what happened in Miami? Miami did not have a good offense, and that does impact how you show up. Apparently, the culture in Miami was so poor that the practice looked like walkthroughs for most teams. Mike McDaniel is no longer a head coach because of a lot of things. And to be honest with you, Mike McDaniels, as a genius, as a mind, seemed great. But I'll be honest with you, the way he carried himself would be it left a lot to be desired for what I would consider a head coach in the NFL. Remember, these people are technically the CEOs of these organizations in many ways, or executive C-suite executives in the NFL. They should be able to run the entire program. I didn't get that from Mike McDaniels. I got great offensive mind though, cool guy, fly kicks. So for me to sit there and be able to say, well, hey, he should have kept it all together, and for it not to work out, kind of expected after a while. Looked great for a second, but once the stuff hit the fan, you can kind of see it. So I say all that to say the production that you saw, or lack of production from some people's case, could be a microcosm of showing you that hey, he wasn't really there. And as many people would say, well, they get paid this, that, and the other. You all work jobs too, and sometimes you're not there, especially if the culture is bad. That doesn't change simply because there's extra zeros on the paycheck. Humans are still humans. So there's still a lot left in the tank for Bradley. There could be a lot left that period. I mean, honestly, he could get here, and with the way that this culture is ran, you can have a career year here because that's what we're starting to see. That's what Ben Johnson has brought here. That's what he's expecting. And guess what? When you set a good culture, when you have clear expectations, people tend to try to perform and live up to that. That could be the very case for Bradley Chubb. But again, this is just one of the many things that we're going to continue to talk about because there's going to be more players released. There's going to be more hypotheticals that come out there. But I want to know your thoughts. Is this somebody that we should actually consider? Somebody we should go after? Let me know your thoughts. Whether it's love, whether it's hate, put it in the chat. I'll be in there with you. Till next time. Peace.